The lights of the casino glittered like distant stars as I watched Kate confidently navigate the tables. She was radiant tonight, her laughter mingling with the clinking of chips and the hum of anticipation that permeated the air. We had come here to celebrate her recent promotion, but little did I know that this night would mark the beginning of the end. "Another round of drinks?" I asked, trying to keep up with her exuberance. She nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. "Sure, hun. I'm feeling lucky tonight." Luck seemed to be on her side indeed. At the blackjack table, she played with a finesse that left seasoned gamblers in awe. I couldn't help but admire her confidence, even as a small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. As the evening wore on, Kate's wins grew more substantial. Her stack of chips grew taller, and the attention she attracted from other players was undeniable. I joined her intermittently, placing bets alongside her, but it was clear that tonight was her night. By midnight, she had amassed a small fortune. I marveled at her luck and skill, feeling a mix of pride and unease. There was something about the way she interacted with certain individuals, exchanging glances that lingered a fraction too long, that began to unsettle me. "Kate, who was that guy you were talking to earlier?" I finally asked, unable to ignore my instincts any longer. She flashed me a dazzling smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, just someone I met at the bar. He's a friend of a friend." Her casual dismissal did little to ease my growing apprehension. There was a tension in the air now, a subtle shift in our dynamic that I couldn't quite place. Despite her wins, a cloud of doubt had settled over us, casting a shadow on what should have been a night of celebration. Little did I know, this evening was just the beginning of a betrayal that would shatter our lives. The morning after our casino night, I decided to surprise Kate. She was still asleep, her face peaceful, oblivious to the suspicions gnawing at me. I slipped out of bed and headed to the most exclusive jewelry store in town. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The jeweler's voice was smooth, practiced. "I'd like to see your finest diamond necklaces," I replied, trying to push aside my doubts. The jeweler presented an array of sparkling options, but one stood out, a delicate piece with a brilliant diamond centerpiece. It was perfect. As I purchased it, I couldn't help but think that maybe this gesture would bring us closer, dispelling the unease that had settled between us. When I returned home, Kate was up, sipping coffee at the kitchen table. She looked up, surprised to see me back so soon. "What's the occasion?" she asked, raising an eyebrow as I handed her the elegantly wrapped box. "Open it and see," I said, trying to gauge her reaction. Her eyes widened as she lifted the necklace from the box. "Oh, John, it's beautiful." She stood and threw her arms around me, her gratitude genuine, if only for a moment, but even as she kissed me, I felt a distance, an unspoken barrier. "Just a little something to celebrate your winnings," I said, trying to mask my lingering doubts with a smile. Kate wore the necklace with pride, showing it off to friends and family. For a brief time, it seemed to work. Our interactions were warmer, more affectionate. But the nagging feeling that something was off persisted. A few days later, as Kate prepared for another evening out, I noticed her taking extra care with her appearance. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the diamond necklace, her expression unreadable. "Meeting someone special tonight?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just some friends," she replied, her tone light but evasive. I watched her leave, the door closing with a sense of finality that chilled me. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to find out what it was. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. I began to wonder if the necklace was just another piece in a puzzle I had yet to understand. The next morning, my suspicions deepened. Kate's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages, which she quickly dismissed with a flick of her fingers. She seemed distracted, her laughter forced. I decided to take a closer look when she wasn't around. It didn't take long. When Kate went to take a shower, I unlocked her phone, my hands shaking. The messages were from a contact named Jake, and their content left little to the imagination. My heart sank as I realized the depth of her betrayal. The diamond necklace now felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of my misplaced trust. But I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. I needed a plan, a way to gather more evidence, and ensure she couldn't simply talk her way out of it. The days that followed were a blur of surveillance and heartache. I hired a private investigator to track Kate's movements, documenting every clandestine meeting and illicit message. The evidence piled up, each piece more damning than the last. Finally, with a heavy heart, I confronted her. She tried to deny it at first, but the proof was irrefutable. The look of betrayal in her eyes mirrored my own, but there was no turning back now. Our marriage was over, and I would make sure she faced the consequences. The day after confronting Kate, I couldn't shake the images and messages I'd found on her phone. My heart ached with betrayal, but my mind was set on uncovering the full extent of her deceit. The private investigator I'd hired, Tom, was proving invaluable in this endeavor. "Morning, John," Tom greeted me at our usual coffee shop. He slid a manila envelope across the table. "I've got more for you." With a sinking feeling, I opened the envelope. Inside were photographs of Kate and Jake meeting at various locations. Restaurants, hotels, even our favorite park. Each image was a dagger to my heart, but I knew I needed this evidence. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice strained. Tom hesitated. "From what I can tell, at least 6 months, maybe longer." 6 months. The words echoed in my mind, amplifying the pain. Our anniversary, vacations, even ordinary days, all tainted by her betrayal. But amidst the pain, a resolve began to form. I would not let her get away with this. I spent the next few days meticulously documenting everything. Emails, text messages, financial records, anything that could strengthen my case. Kate remained oblivious, assuming my silence was a sign of acceptance or defeat. Little did she know, I was preparing for the ultimate confrontation. One evening, as Kate was preparing for another night out with friends, I decided to follow her myself. I wanted to see firsthand what she was doing and who she was meeting. Disguised in a baseball cap and sunglasses, I trailed her car through the city until she pulled into the parking lot of a fancy restaurant. From a distance, I watched as she greeted Jake with a kiss. They laughed, held hands, and looked every bit the loving couple. The sight made my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was just another piece of evidence. After dinner, they left together, heading to a hotel on the outskirts of town. I snapped a few more photos and recorded a video as they checked in. My heart shattered, but my resolve only strengthened. It was time to put my plan into action. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer, Mr. Thompson. He was a seasoned professional with a reputation for being ruthless when it came to divorce cases. "John, I've reviewed the evidence you provided," he said, his tone serious. "We have a strong case for adultery. This will work in your favor during the divorce proceedings." "That's not all," I replied, leaning forward. "I want to press charges. Financial fraud, embezzlement, anything that can stick." "Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about this? It could get messy." "I'm sure," I said, my voice firm. "I want her to pay for what she's done, not just to me, but to our family." Over the next few weeks, we gathered more evidence of Kate's financial misdeeds. Unauthorized transfers from our joint accounts, extravagant purchases she couldn't possibly afford on her salary alone, and suspicious business dealings with Jake. It was all falling into place. Finally, the day came when I confronted Kate with everything. I waited until she was home, sitting in the living room with the diamond necklace glinting mockingly against her skin. "Kate, we need to talk," I said, my voice cold and detached. She looked up, surprise flashing in her eyes. "What is it, John?" I placed the stack of evidence on the table between us. "I know about you and Jake. I know about the money, and I have enough to ruin both of you." Her face paled, and she reached for the documents, her hands trembling. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes widened with horror. "John, I can explain—" "Save it," I interrupted, my tone sharp. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. Divorce papers are being filed, and charges are being pressed. You're going to pay for this, Kate, one way or another." For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She knew she was trapped, with no way out, and as much as it hurt, I felt a grim satisfaction. Justice was coming, and there would be no escape. The tension in the room was palpable as Kate stared at the pile of evidence I had assembled. Her hands shook, and her face turned a sickly shade of pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and grim satisfaction watching her struggle. "John, please," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. "I can explain." "Explain what, Kate?" I shot back, my voice cold and unwavering. Explain how you betrayed me, how you stole from me, or how you lied to my face for months. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I was past the point of caring. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. Jake, it started as just a friendship, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. We met at a work event and we just clicked, but it turned into something more, something I didn't expect. Something you didn't expect? I echoed, my tone incredulous. You expect me to believe this just happened? That you had no control over it? Kate shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I was lonely, John. You were always working, always distant. I felt like you didn't care anymore. Her words stung, but they didn't absolve her of responsibility. So you decided to find comfort in another man, and not just any man, but someone who helped you steal from me? It wasn't like that, she pleaded. Jake, he understood me. He made me feel alive again, but I never meant for it to go this far. Far enough to empty our bank accounts, I retorted, slamming my hand on the table. Far enough to lie to my face every single day. You didn't just cheat on me, Kate. You betrayed everything we built together. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there, watching her, feeling a strange mix of pity and contempt. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But I knew that wasn't true. Things would never be okay again. John, I'm sorry, she cried, her voice breaking. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but please, don't ruin my life. I can't go to prison. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. You should have thought about that before you started this affair, before you started stealing. Actions have consequences, Kate. She looked up at me, desperation in her eyes. What if I repay the money? What if I end things with Jake? Can we try to fix this? Fix this? I laughed bitterly. There's no fixing this, Kate. Our marriage is over. I've already filed for divorce. And as for the money, it's too late. The authorities are already involved. You're going to have to face the music. Her sobs grew louder, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. I'm staying at a hotel tonight, I said, my voice cold and detached. The lawyers will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. And as for the charges, you'll be hearing from the police soon. With that, I walked out of the house, leaving Kate to her despair. The evening air was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the heated confrontation inside. I got into my car and drove away, the weight of what had just happened settling heavily on my shoulders. As I checked into the hotel, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. My marriage was over, my trust shattered. But I knew I had done the right thing. Kate had to face the consequences of her actions, and I had to start rebuilding my life. That night, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed of the hotel room, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. But amidst the turmoil, there was a glimmer of resolve. I had taken the first step towards justice, and I wouldn't stop until Kate was held accountable for her betrayal. The following days were a blur of legal consultations and paperwork. My lawyer, Mr. Thompson, was a rock of steadiness and professionalism. He assured me that we had a strong case, not only for divorce, but also for pressing criminal charges against Kate. John, the evidence is compelling, he said during one of our meetings. We've got her for adultery and financial fraud. The latter is what will really hurt her. I just want this nightmare to be over, I replied, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on me. I want her to face the consequences, but I also need to move on with my life. Mr. Thompson nodded. We'll make sure of that. I've already filed the divorce papers, and the police are investigating the financial irregularities. This won't be quick or easy, but we'll get there. As the legal wheels began to turn, Kate's demeanor shifted dramatically. She went from pleading and apologetic to defiant and angry. It was clear she had consulted her own lawyer, and now she was ready to fight back. One afternoon, I received a call from her. Her voice was cold and calculated. John, we need to talk. There's nothing left to talk about, Kate, I replied, my patience wearing thin. I'm not going down without a fight, she said, her tone icy. You think you can just ruin my life? Think again. I hung up, feeling a mix of frustration and resolve. This was far from over, and I needed to be prepared for the battle ahead. A few days later, I was served with a countersuit. Kate was accusing me of emotional neglect and infidelity, claims that were completely unfounded. Her tactics were desperate, and I knew it was a ploy to muddy the waters and gain some leverage. I met with Mr. Thompson to discuss our next steps. "She's trying to turn the tables," I said, handing him the papers. He skimmed through the documents, his expression unreadable. "This is standard in cases like this. She's trying to shift the blame and create doubt, but we have the evidence on our side." Despite his reassurances, the stress of the situation was taking its toll. I found it difficult to concentrate at work, my thoughts constantly drifting back to the legal battles and Kate's betrayal. Friends and family offered support, but it felt like an endless storm with no clear end in sight. The police investigation into Kate's financial activities was progressing. Detective Larson, the officer in charge, kept me updated. "We found significant evidence of embezzlement," he said during one of our phone calls. "It looks like she was funneling money into a separate account under Jake's name." The news was both a relief and a further blow. Kate had not only betrayed our marriage, but had also committed serious financial crimes. The depth of her deceit seemed boundless. The first court hearing for the divorce was scheduled, and as the date approached, my anxiety grew. I knew this was just the beginning, but I was determined to see it through. On the day of the hearing, I sat in the courtroom, my heart pounding as I watched Kate enter with her lawyer. She looked composed, but there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The proceedings were tense and confrontational. Both sides presented their initial arguments, with Mr. Thompson laying out the evidence of Kate's infidelity and financial misconduct. Her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman named Miss Anderson, countered with claims of my supposed neglect and emotional abuse. As I listened to the back and forth, it became clear that this was going to be a long and arduous process, but I felt a sense of determination growing within me. I would not let Kate's lies and manipulation define the outcome. I would fight for justice, for the truth, and for my own peace of mind. After the hearing, Mr. Thompson and I discussed the next steps. "We'll need to gather more detailed financial records and witness statements," he said. "This is just the beginning, but we're in a strong position." I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and resolve. Let's do whatever it takes. As I left the courthouse, I realized that while the road ahead was daunting, I was not alone. I had the support of my lawyer, my friends, and my family. And most importantly, I had the truth on my side. The days following the initial court hearing were a mix of grim determination and emotional exhaustion. I had moved into a small apartment downtown, far from the memories that haunted our once shared home. Every night, as I lay on the unfamiliar bed, the weight of Kate's betrayal and the upcoming legal battles bore down on me. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I received a call from Detective Larson. "John, we need to talk. Can you come down to the station tomorrow morning?" "Of course," I replied, feeling a surge of anxiety. "Is everything all right?" "I'd rather discuss it in person," he said before hanging up. The next morning, I arrived at the police station, my mind racing with possibilities. Detective Larson greeted me with a serious expression and led me to his office. "John, we've uncovered more evidence," he began, handing me a stack of documents. "Kate and Jake have been involved in a series of fraudulent activities. It's worse than we initially thought." As I looked through the documents, a cold anger settled in my chest. It was clear that their relationship was not just a betrayal of our marriage, but also a criminal partnership. "We're issuing warrants for their arrest," Detective Larson continued. "But there's a problem. Kate has gone into hiding." "Hiding?" I echoed, feeling a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Do you have any idea where she might be?" "We're tracking her movements, but she's been careful. It's likely she's getting help from Jake." The news was a blow. Just when I thought I was making progress, Kate had slipped away, evading justice once again. I thanked Detective Larson and left the station, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Back at my apartment, I called Mr. Thompson to update him on the situation. "She's gone into hiding," I said, my voice heavy with frustration. Mr. Thompson sighed. "This complicates things, but it's not entirely unexpected. We'll continue with the divorce proceedings in her absence. As for the criminal charges, the authorities will handle that." The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and sleepless nights. I threw myself into my work, trying to distract myself from the constant stress. Friends and colleagues noticed the change in me, offering words of encouragement and support, but it felt like an endless storm with no clear end in sight. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old photos, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "John, please, we need to talk. Kate." A surge of anger and confusion hit me. How dare she contact me after everything she'd done? I debated whether to respond or ignore her, but curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want, Kate?" I typed back, my fingers trembling. Her response came quickly. "I need your help. Please, meet me. Just once. I can't explain everything over text." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a secluded park on the outskirts of town. As I drove to the meeting place, my mind raced with questions. What did she want? Was this some kind of trap? When I arrived, Kate was already there, looking tired and worn. She approached me cautiously, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and desperation. "John, thank you for coming," she said softly. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need your help." I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. "Why should I help you, Kate, after everything you've done?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm in trouble. Jake has turned against me. He's dangerous, John. I didn't know what I was getting into." Her words were a jumble of excuses and pleas, but something in her voice sounded genuine. Despite my better judgment, I felt a pang of sympathy. She had made terrible choices, but she was still the woman I had once loved. "Why should I believe you?" I asked, my voice cold. "Because I'm telling the truth," she replied, desperation in her eyes. "I made mistakes, but Jake is the real criminal. He manipulated me, used me. Please, John, I need your help to get out of this." I stood there, torn between anger and a lingering sense of duty. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let her face the consequences of her actions alone. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, couldn't turn my back on her completely. "All right, Kate," I said finally, "I'll help you. But this doesn't change anything between us. You have to turn yourself in and face the consequences." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, John. I promise I'll make things right." As we walked back to our cars, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a mistake. But I had made my decision, and now I had to see it through. For better or worse, the path ahead was uncertain, and I could only hope that I was doing the right thing. As we walked to our cars, the weight of my decision pressed heavily on me. Kate's desperate plea for help had stirred a mixture of emotions: anger, betrayal, and an unbidden sense of obligation. Despite everything, I couldn't completely abandon her. "Where are you staying?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been moving around," she replied, "mostly staying with friends who don't know the full story." "That's not safe," I said, shaking my head. "If Jake is as dangerous as you say, you need to be somewhere secure." "I know," she whispered, her eyes reflecting genuine fear. "But I don't have many options." "There's a motel on the outskirts of town," I suggested. "I'll book a room for you there. It's not much, but it's better than couch surfing." "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I don't deserve your help, John, but thank you." I nodded, feeling the familiar ache of our shattered trust. "I'll drive you there. We can talk more once you're settled." The drive was tense and silent, filled with unspoken words and unresolved pain. Kate stared out the window, her face a mask of worry. I couldn't help but remember the times we'd driven together, laughing and planning our future. Those memories now felt like distant echoes of a different life. At the motel, I booked a room under a false name to keep her off the radar. Once inside, Kate sank onto the bed, looking exhausted. "Tell me everything," I said, sitting across from her. "I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Kate took a deep breath and began to recount her story. It started innocently enough. "Jake was charming, attentive. I was lonely, John. You were always so busy, so distant. I didn't realize how deeply I'd fallen until it was too late." She hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "Jake wasn't just interested in me. He saw an opportunity. He convinced me to help him with some financial transactions. At first, it seemed harmless, but then the amounts got larger. I tried to back out, but by then, I was in too deep." "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice calm. "I was scared," she admitted. scared of losing you, scared of what Jake might do. When you found out about the affair, everything spiraled out of control. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong." Her confession left me reeling. I had suspected much of this, but hearing it from her own lips made it painfully real. "Jake, what kind of man is he?" "He's manipulative, controlling," Kate said, shuddering. "He has connections in the criminal world. When he realized I was no longer useful, he turned on me. That's why I need your help, John. I can't do this alone." I rubbed my temples, feeling the enormity of the situation. "All right, we'll figure this out, but you need to cooperate fully. No more lies, no more secrets." "I promise," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll do whatever it takes." Leaving Kate at the motel, I drove to meet Detective Larson. He needed to know the full extent of Jake's involvement and the danger Kate was in. "John, what brings you here?" Larson asked, surprised to see me. "We need to talk," I said, explaining the latest developments. Larson listened intently, his expression growing more serious. "This changes things. If Jake is as dangerous as she says, we need to move quickly." "I'll help however I can," I offered, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "But we need to keep Kate safe." "We'll put her under protective custody," Larson said. "And we'll need to set a trap for Jake, get him to reveal himself." The plan was set in motion. Kate was moved to a secure location, and I kept up appearances pretending to go about my daily life. Meanwhile, the police worked behind the scenes, gathering evidence and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. One evening, I received a call from Kate. "John, they're asking me to meet Jake. They want to catch him in the act." "Are you ready for that?" I asked, knowing how terrifying it must be for her. "I have to be," she replied, a hint of steel in her voice. "It's the only way to end this." The meeting was arranged at a secluded spot, with police ready to intervene. As I watched from a distance, my heart pounded. Kate stood nervously, glancing around. Minutes felt like hours, and then Jake appeared. He approached Kate, his demeanor menacing. "Thought you could hide from me?" he sneered. "Jake, please," she said, trying to sound calm. "I just want this to end." "It'll end when I say it ends," he snapped, grabbing her arm. That was the cue. The police swarmed in, arresting Jake before he could react. As they led him away, Kate collapsed, shaking with relief. I rushed to her side, helping her to her feet. "It's over, Kate. You're safe now." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, John, for everything." As I held her, I knew that while this chapter was closing, the road to healing and rebuilding would be long. But for the first time in a while, there was a glimmer of hope. The days following Jake's arrest were a whirlwind of police reports, court summons, and media attention. Detective Larson kept me updated on the progress of the case, and Kate remained in protective custody, safe from any potential retribution. I found myself at the center of a legal maelstrom, with Jake facing multiple charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence against him was overwhelming thanks to Kate's cooperation and the thorough investigation led by Larson and his team. The day of Jake's trial arrived, and the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters gathered outside, eager for any new details. I took my place in the gallery, my heart pounding as I watched Jake being led in, handcuffed and defiant. His cold eyes scanned the room, briefly locking onto mine with a look of pure venom. The prosecution presented a meticulous case, outlining Jake's criminal activities and his manipulative relationship with Kate. Financial records, email exchanges, and witness testimonies painted a damning picture. As I listened, I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. Justice was finally within reach. Kate took the stand, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She recounted her involvement with Jake, her regret palpable. "I was foolish and desperate," she admitted, "but I am here today to make things right." Her testimony was a turning point. The jury could see the fear and remorse in her eyes, and it was clear she had been a pawn in Jake's elaborate scheme. Larson had assured her of some leniency in exchange for her full cooperation, and she had held up her end of the bargain. When it was Jake's turn to testify, his arrogance was evident. He tried to paint himself as a misunderstood businessman, claiming Kate had acted alone out of spite. But his lies were transparent, and the prosecution tore through his feeble defenses with ease. After days of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the foreman stood to deliver their decision. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jake Turner, guilty on all charges. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Jake's face twisted with rage as he was led away, his fate sealed. Justice had been served. Kate and I walked out of the courtroom together, the weight of the past months beginning to lift. The sun felt warmer, the air fresher. There was still much to address, but this victory was a significant step forward. "Thank you, John," Kate said quietly, "for believing in me, even when I didn't deserve it." I nodded, the anger I had harbored slowly giving way to understanding. "We both made mistakes, Kate, but we also did the right thing in the end." In the following weeks, the legal process for our divorce continued, but with a newfound sense of closure. Kate's cooperation had earned her a reduced sentence, and she was determined to make amends for her actions. She found a therapist and started attending support groups, working to rebuild her life from the ground up. As for me, I focused on healing and moving forward. I reconnected with friends, threw myself into work, and even started seeing a therapist to deal with the emotional aftermath of the betrayal. The road to recovery was long, but each day brought a little more clarity and peace. One evening, I received a letter from Kate. It was a heartfelt apology, acknowledging her mistakes and expressing gratitude for my support. "I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday," she wrote, "and I hope you find the happiness you deserve." Reading her words, I felt a sense of closure. Forgiveness would take time, but I was willing to try. We had both been through a lot, and while our paths were now separate, there was no need for lingering bitterness. Life slowly began to return to normal. I started dating again, tentatively at first, but with a cautious optimism. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold. One afternoon, as I was walking through the park, I saw a familiar face. It was Kate, sitting on a bench, looking out at the lake. She looked up and saw me, a tentative smile on her lips. "John," she said, standing up, "it's good to see you." "It's good to see you too, Kate," I replied, feeling a sense of calm. "How are you?" "I'm doing better," she said, "one day at a time." We talked for a while, catching up like old friends. There was no animosity, just a mutual understanding of the journey we had both been on. As the sun set, we said our goodbyes, knowing that while our chapter together had ended, a new one had begun for each of us. After the trial and the initial relief of justice served, life began to settle into a new rhythm. I threw myself into work and focused on reclaiming a sense of normalcy. My colleagues noticed the change in me, and their support was invaluable. Evenings were spent reconnecting with old friends and rediscovering hobbies that had fallen by the wayside during the turmoil of the past year. One sunny afternoon, while I was out for a run, I encountered an old friend, Mark. We hadn't seen each other in years, but he had heard about my situation through mutual acquaintances. Over coffee, we caught up on life, and I found myself opening up about everything that had happened with Kate and Jake. "Man, you've been through the ringer," Mark said, shaking his head. "But I'm glad to see you on the other side of it." "Yeah," I agreed, feeling a mix of exhaustion and optimism. "It's been a rough journey, but I'm getting there." "Have you thought about joining any support groups?" Mark suggested. "It might help to talk to others who've been through similar experiences." I considered his words. The idea of sharing my story with strangers was daunting, but it could also be a way to process the lingering emotions. "I'll think about it," I said, appreciating his concern. That evening, I researched local support groups and found one for individuals recovering from betrayal and infidelity. Hesitant but hopeful, I decided to attend a meeting. The group met in a cozy room at a community center, and I was welcomed warmly by the facilitator, Janet. "Welcome, John," she said with a kind smile. "We're glad to have you here." As the meeting progressed, I listened to others share their stories. Some were raw and painful, others hopeful and inspiring. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and began to speak. "My name is John, and I've been through a lot this past year," I started, feeling the weight of my experiences. "My wife cheated on me, and it led to uncovering a web of deceit and crime. It's been a long road to get here, but I'm trying to rebuild my life." The group listened without judgment, and I felt a sense of camaraderie. After the meeting, a few members approached me, offering words of encouragement and sharing their own journeys of healing. Over the next few weeks, I continued attending the support group, finding solace in the shared experiences. One evening, as we were wrapping up, Janet approached me. "John, you've made incredible progress. I can see the strength in you." "Thanks, Janet," I replied, feeling a warmth in her words. "This group has been a lifeline for me." "Have you thought about sharing your story more widely?" she asked. "It might help others who are going through similar situations." The idea intrigued me. Writing had always been a hobby, and perhaps my story could offer hope to others. Inspired, I began jotting down my experiences, reflecting on the lessons learned and the journey of healing. Meanwhile, Kate and I maintained occasional contact, mostly through brief messages and updates on our respective lives. She had completed her therapy sessions and was making strides in rebuilding her life. Our interactions were civil, even friendly at times, but there was an unspoken understanding that our paths had diverged. One weekend, while organizing my apartment, I stumbled upon a box of old photos. Among them were pictures of happier times with Kate, moments filled with laughter and dreams for the future. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of closure. Those memories were part of my past, but they no longer defined my present. As summer turned to fall, I received an unexpected invitation. It was from a local community college, asking if I would be interested in speaking at a seminar on overcoming adversity. They had heard about my story through the support group and thought it could inspire their students. Nervous but excited, I accepted the invitation. On the day of the seminar, I stood before a room full of eager faces, sharing my journey of betrayal, resilience, and recovery. The students listened intently, their questions thoughtful and probing. After the seminar, a young woman approached me. "Thank you for sharing your story," she said. "It gives me hope. I've been through something similar, and hearing your experience makes me believe I can get through it too." Her words touched me deeply, reaffirming my decision to open up about my past. Helping others find strength in their struggles became a new source of fulfillment for me. Life continued to move forward, each day bringing new opportunities and challenges. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, gradually building a support network that helped me navigate the ups and downs. One evening, while out with friends, I met someone special. Her name was Emma, and there was an instant connection between us. She was kind, understanding, and had a warmth that drew me in. As we got to know each other, I found myself opening up about my past, and she listened with empathy and compassion. "Everyone has a past, John," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "What matters is how we move forward and what we learn from it." Her words resonated with me, and I realized that I was ready to take a step towards a new chapter in my life. Emma and I started dating, our relationship blossoming slowly but surely. She became a beacon of hope, showing me that it was possible to trust and love again. As the seasons changed, so did I. The pain of the past had not vanished, but it had transformed into a source of strength. I had learned to forgive, not just Kate, but also myself. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer walking it alone. Life with Emma was everything I had hoped for and more. We shared a deep connection, one built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. As our relationship deepened, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. We spent our weekends exploring new places, trying out different cuisines, and simply enjoying each other's company. I started to believe that I had finally left the darkness of the past behind. One evening, while Emma and I were having dinner at my apartment, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it, a sense of unease settling in my stomach. "John, it's urgent. We need to talk." "Kate." Seeing her name brought back a rush of conflicting emotions. I had thought our chapter was closed, but clearly there was something she needed to tell me. I glanced at Emma, who noticed my change in demeanor. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern in her eyes. "It's Kate," I said, showing her the message. "She says it's urgent." Emma nodded, her expression supportive. "Do you need to see her?" "I think I should," I replied, "just to find out what's going on." I texted Kate back, agreeing to meet at a quiet cafe downtown. Emma squeezed my hand reassuringly as I left, giving me the strength I needed to face whatever was coming. When I arrived at the cafe, Kate was already there, looking anxious and worn. She greeted me with a weak smile, and we sat down in a secluded corner. "Thank you for coming, John," she began, her voice trembling. "I know it's been a long time, but something's come up. Something you need to know." "What's going on, Kate?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I've been going through some of my old files," she said, pulling out a folder. "And I found something disturbing. It's about Jake. He wasn't just involved in fraud and embezzlement. There was more. Much more." She handed me the folder, and as I flipped through the pages, a chill ran down my spine. There were documents, emails, and photographs linking Jake to a larger criminal network. Drug trafficking, money laundering, even ties to organized crime. It was a web far more intricate and dangerous than we had ever imagined. "Why didn't you tell the police about this before?" I asked, feeling a mix of frustration and fear. "I didn't know the extent of it until recently," she replied. "I thought I had handed over everything, but these files were hidden in a backup drive I'd forgotten about. John, this changes everything. Jake's associates are still out there, and they might come after us." The gravity of the situation hit me hard. The nightmare we thought was over had only been a fraction of the truth. "We need to go to the police," I said firmly. "Immediately." Kate nodded, her eyes filled with worry. "I was hoping you'd say that. I'm scared, John. I don't know who to trust anymore." I reassured her as best I could, and together we went to the police station. Detective Larson met us, his expression serious as we explained the new evidence. "This is significant," he said, leafing through the documents. "We'll need to open a new investigation, and you both will need protection." The next few days were a blur of police interviews, security arrangements, and constant vigilance. I kept Emma informed, and she supported me through every step, her presence a calming influence in the storm of uncertainty. One evening, as I sat with Emma in the living room, my phone rang. It was Detective Larson. "John, we've uncovered more details. Jake's network is larger than we thought, and it seems they've been monitoring both you and Kate." "Monitoring us?" I echoed, feeling a surge of alarm. "Yes," Larson confirmed. "We believe they might be planning something. You need to be extremely careful." The realization that we were still targets, that the danger was far from over, was a bitter pill to swallow. But with Emma by my side and the police on high alert, I felt a renewed determination to see this through. Days turned into weeks as the investigation progressed. Larson kept us updated, but the tension was palpable. We lived cautiously, always watching our backs, yet trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. One night, as Emma and I were getting ready for bed, she turned to me, her eyes filled with concern. "John, I know this is hard, but we'll get through it together. You're not alone in this." Her words were a beacon of hope. I pulled her into a hug, grateful for her unwavering support. "Thank you, Emma. I don't know what I'd do without you." As the investigation continued, we braced ourselves for whatever might come. The path ahead was uncertain, but with the truth finally coming to light, we knew we had to face it head on. The hidden truth had surfaced, and now, more than ever, it was time to confront the shadows of the past and ensure they never cast their darkness over our lives again. The weeks that followed were marked by an uneasy blend of routine and heightened alertness. Emma and I adjusted to the new normal, with heightened security measures becoming a part of our daily lives. Detective Larson's updates were our lifeline, offering both reassurance and a stark reminder of the danger still looming. One evening, Larson called with urgent news. "John, we need you and Kate to come down to the station. We've made a breakthrough." Emma gave me a supportive nod as I prepared to leave. "Be careful," she whispered, her concern palpable. At the police station, Kate was already there, looking as anxious as I felt. Larson ushered us into a conference room, where a map and a series of photographs were pinned to a board. "We've identified several key figures in Jake's network," Larson began, pointing to the photos. "These individuals are deeply entrenched in various criminal activities, and they've been coordinating their efforts to keep their operations under wraps." I studied the faces on the board, feeling a mix of anger and determination. "What do we need to do?" I asked. Larson exchanged a glance with his team before answering. "We've arranged a sting operation. We're going to take them down, but we need your help. Kate, your testimony and your knowledge of Jake's dealings are crucial. And John, your cooperation and insights are invaluable." Kate and I nodded, ready to do whatever it took. The plan was set in motion, and the days leading up to the sting were filled with intense preparation. We rehearsed our roles, ensured all communications were secure, and stayed under constant police protection. The day of the operation dawned with a sense of foreboding. Kate and I were wired with hidden microphones, ready to confront the remnants of Jake's network. The location was a warehouse on the outskirts of town, chosen for its isolation and strategic advantages. As we arrived, the tension was palpable. Police officers were discreetly positioned around the area, ready to move in at a moment's notice. Kate and I exchanged a tense glance before stepping inside. The warehouse was dimly lit, filled with the hum of machinery and the smell of oil. We walked towards the center where a group of men awaited us. At their head was a man I recognized from the photos, Jake's right-hand man, Tony. "Kate," Tony greeted, his voice slick with false charm. "Didn't think you'd show up." "I had no choice," Kate replied, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We need to settle things." Tony's gaze shifted to me, his eyes narrowing. "And who's this?" "I'm John," I said, meeting his stare. "I'm here to make sure Kate is safe." Tony laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." The conversation continued, each word carefully chosen to draw out incriminating details. The hidden microphones captured everything, feeding the information directly to the police outside. Then, as the tension reached its peak, Tony's demeanor shifted. "Enough games," he snapped, signaling to his men. "Time to end this." Before we could react, the police burst in, swarming the warehouse. Chaos erupted as officers subdued Tony and his men, securing the area in a flurry of shouts and movement. Larson approached us, his expression both relieved and serious. "You both did great," he said. "We've got enough evidence to take them down for good." As the dust settled and the suspects were led away in handcuffs, a sense of triumph filled the air. The operation had been a success, and the threat posed by Jake's network was finally neutralized. Back at the station, Kate and I gave our final statements, providing the last pieces of the puzzle. Larson thanked us for our bravery, and as we left, a weight seemed to lift from our shoulders. Outside, the evening air was crisp and cool. Kate turned to me, a tentative smile on her face. "Thank you, John, for everything." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure. "We did it together, Kate." As we parted ways, I headed home to Emma, eager to share the news. She greeted me with a warm hug, her relief evident. "I'm so glad you're safe," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "We finally put an end to it," I replied, feeling the reality of our victory sink in. "Jake's network is dismantled. We can move forward now." That night, as I lay in bed beside Emma, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. The battle was over, and the path ahead was clear. With the hidden threats unearthed and justice served, I was ready to embrace the future, secure in the knowledge that the past no longer held power over me. The culmination of months of investigation led to a dawn raid on Kate's residence. Police officers swarmed in, their expressions steely as they executed the search warrant. I stood outside watching with a mix of disbelief and resignation as Kate was escorted out in handcuffs, her face a mask of defiance and fear. The weight of her betrayal hung heavy in the air, amplified by the flash of cameras capturing the moment for the evening news. The courtroom was a stage for the unraveling of Kate's deceit. As the trial commenced, details of her elaborate schemes and financial manipulations were laid bare. Witness after witness testified against her, painting a picture of calculated betrayal that stunned those in attendance. I sat quietly, absorbing every damning revelation, my heart heavy with the realization of how deeply I had been deceived. After deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty on multiple counts of financial fraud and embezzlement. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom as Kate was sentenced to a significant term of imprisonment. Her expression faltered briefly, a flicker of realization crossing her face before she was led away, the clang of shackles marking the end of her freedom. With Kate's conviction, I found myself at a crossroads of emotions. The scandalous divorce and her imprisonment marked the end of a chapter in my life fraught with pain and betrayal. Standing outside the courtroom, I took a deep breath, steeling myself to confront the loss and begin anew. It was time to rebuild, to rediscover stability and trust, forging a path forward from the wreckage of our shattered life together.